Hello again and welcome back to our course on Project 2019 Advanced. In this section we're going to look at budget costs. I'm going to explain to you why people use budget costs, why you may want to use budget costs, and how you can compare progress on a project with a project budget with specific reference to costs. Now I should point out that you can pretty much do the same thing with budget work. And the approach with budget work is actually very similar, but we're going to concentrate here on budget costs. So I'm back here at the house build project. This is version 03. If I go to the resource sheet, you'll see that currently it's empty. And in fact, there are no costs or resources assigned at all on this project yet. So one thing I might do very early on in a project like this is prepare a budget. Now, this wouldn't necessarily relate to any very accurate estimate of costs, but I might say, for example, think that labour costs are going to be $40,000 and the material costs are going to be $30,000 and the legal costs are maybe going to be $10,000 and so on. So I might come up with some budget figures. And then during the course of the project, I'm going to want to see how the project is progressing against my budget. Now, rather than do all of those, all I'm going to do is take one element and show you how you might deal with one element, and then other elements will be dealt with in an equivalent way. Now, one thing I must make very clear at this point is that you shouldn't confuse budget costs with baseline cost. A baseline is a saved copy of a detailed schedule at a point in time. In fact, it can be a detailed or perhaps not very detailed schedule, but it's a copy of the schedule which will include details of start dates, end dates, costs, etc., whatever has been added at that point. Budget costs are assigned at the project level. And although we can compare the budget cost with our actual costs in whatever categories we've set up, it's not the same as comparing progress, actuals with a baseline. So let's use as our example the budget cost for services. And by services, we mean things like connecting the house to main services and getting an inspection by a local builder. So first of all, let's go to the resource sheet and we're going to set up a resource called service costs. So in the resource name, let's type service costs. The type is going to be cost. The initials I'm going to say are serve costs. And we're also going to create a group called Service Costs Group. And I'll explain the use of the group in just a moment. Now I'm going to open up that resource by double clicking. And I'm going to check the budget box. So I'm just here on that general tab. And let's select budget and click on OK. And now what I'm going to do is to assign it to the whole project. Now, when I assign a budget cost, it must be assigned to the project's summary task. You can only assign it to the whole project, and you do that by assigning it to the project's summary task. You can't specify the units, you can't specify the cost, you can only assign it. However, once you have assigned it, you can then specify the cost in one of a number of ways. One way of doing it is we've currently got the Gantt chart view, and let's make sure we're in task usage view, which we are. And you can see here the service costs. And what I'm going to do is in the budget cost, I'm just going to say 500. Now bear in mind that I may have a number of budget items there. Each of them can have its own individual budget value, and the zero summary task, in this case House Build 03, has a total budget cost for the project. Now, in order to specify the budget cost, you're already quite restricted in how and where you do it. In this case, I selected the cost table. I then inserted a column. And again, this should be something we're getting used to doing. And in this column, I'm going to show budget work. So I'm just going to type in budget and select budget work. And of course, I would specify it against the particular budget work resource that I had already assigned to the project summary task. And then I would give it the budget work amount in whatever units I wanted to. The default there, of course, is hours. So there's my budget for service costs. Now what I'm going to do is to create a couple of resources that are going to basically be in the same category as that budget cost. Now when I say in the same category, I actually have a number of ways of doing that. What I've done on this occasion is to create a group, and I'll specify what you might loosely call this category by putting those other resources in the same group. Now let me set up these other two cost resources. You can join me again in a couple of moments once I've done that. So there we are. I've set up the local inspector who is going to inspect the build and hopefully give it approval. And I've set up the service company who will be connecting the services to this new build. So let me go back into the Gantt chart. And I'm going to first find all of the connector services and assign one of the resources to that. So let's select connector services, right click and assign resources. And we're going to select service company. And I've discovered that the cost of using the service company to do the connection is $295. So I'm going to type that into here. And notice now that I've done that, that cost is updated in the cost table. And final inspection. And we're going to assign the local inspector. And the cost charged by the local inspector is $265. And again, you can see that's been updated in the cost table. So against my original budget of $500, I've now got two specific costs. Now, don't forget, you could do this for many categories of cost and work, and I'm only demonstrating it with one, but let's now see how we could report on this in a very convenient way. So we're talking about budget cost here, and the category we've been dealing with is a resource category. So let's jump back to the resource sheet, and there it is with just our 3 resources on it. And what we're going to show instead of the resource sheet is resource usage view. And we're going to apply a group. So let's select group by, and we're going to create a new group by. Field name, we're just going to type group and click apply. And what you can now see here is that for the group service cost group, the budget cost $500, and then we have the actuals. We have the final inspection, $265, and connector services, $295. And apart from seeing that budget cost $500, you can see the 2 planned costs. And you can also see that at present, our planned spend in service cost group exceeds budget by $60. So that gives us a very convenient way of comparing the budget for one or more categories with the planned and ultimately actual values in those categories as well. And as I've mentioned 2 or 3 times already, we can apply the same principle to work. Just one other thing to show you here, which is also pretty important, and that is you may be interested in the time phase aspects of this. So let me show cost as a detail. So I'm going to switch to cost. And let's just get the whole project in view. So on the View tab, I'm going to click Entire Project. And you can see over on the right there, those 2 costs being incurred. The connector services cost and the final inspection cost. You may want to see how the planned cost compares to the budget cost over a period of time. In this case, you only have 2 items in that group, but you may have many. If I right-click again on Details and go into Detail Styles, if I go down the list of available fields, one of them is Budget Costs. So let's click on Show and OK. Now what Project 2019 does is to actually time phase that budget cost for you over the period of the project. And of course it just divides up the budget cost into those convenient slices for you. You may want to, at the outset, if you realize that you're only going to be spending from this budget cost amount towards the end of the project, you may want to change this distribution of budget cost to reflect the fact that you're going to be spending the money later on. Otherwise, you'll appear to be doing better on cost earlier on the project than perhaps you should be, because you won't be spending any of your service costs until right near the end of the project. So that's an overview of budget costs, and that is also the end of this section. So please join me in the next one.